Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling alcohol consumption, a topic swirling with everyday experiences and, well, often conflicting information. You want to get to the core of what's really going on quickly and thoroughly, and that's exactly what we're here to do.
Precisely. We've sifted through a wealth of scientific research to bring you the most important takeaways, the surprising connections, the insights that truly matter for understanding alcohol's impact.
Our mission for this deep dive is straightforward, to give you an evidence-based understanding of what alcohol does in your body and its broader effects. We're focusing on the key aspects, the ones with the most significant implications, so you can make informed choices. We've looked at a wide range of scientific sources to bring you this distilled knowledge. Okay, let's jump right into the highlights of how our bodies process alcohol.
Right. So when you have a drink, the liver is the main engine doing the work, handling over 90% of the alcohol. Interestingly, your stomach also gets a bit of a head start, breaking down a small amount before it even enters your bloodstream. That's called first-pass metabolism.
So the stomach plays a small initial role before the liver takes over. What are the key steps the liver goes through?
It's basically a three-step process. First, the alcohol, or ethanol, is converted into acetaldehyde. Now, this is a crucial highlight. Acetaldehyde is actually a toxic substance. It's not the alcohol itself that's the main problem in many ways, but what it gets turned into initially.
Toxic, okay, that's a key takeaway right there.
Yeah.
So how does our body deal with this toxic acetaldehyde?
Well, in the second step, another enzyme quickly transforms that toxic acetaldehyde into acetate. Then in the final step, the acetate is converted into acetyl-CoA. What's kind of fascinating here is that acetyl-CoA is the same molecule our bodies use when we break down food, carbs, fats, proteins.
Mm-hmm.
So the energy from alcohol ends up in the same pool as the energy from your meals, basically.
It's a surprising highlight. It's not like alcohol is processed in a completely isolated way then.
Yeah.
Are there any other highlights about how our bodies metabolize alcohol?
Yes, there's a sort of backup pathway involving an enzyme called CYP2E1. This pathway usually only kicks in when alcohol levels are high, but here's a key highlight. It becomes more active with regular, heavy drinking.
Oh, interesting.
It's like the body is trying to adapt, but this adaptation can come with its own set of issues.
So that increased activity at higher levels is a key thing to note. Now, what about how alcohol makes us feel, both the initial buzz and the longer-term effects? What are the highlights there?
Yeah, the feel-good aspect initially is largely due to dopamine release in your brain's reward system. But a crucial highlight is that both alcohol itself and that toxic acetaldehyde contribute to the negative effects we experience later on. Plus, the process of breaking down alcohol generates byproducts called reactive oxygen species, which can also play a role in those less pleasant effects, like inflammation.
Right, so it's not just one thing causing the changes in how we feel. We all know people who seem to handle alcohol differently. What are the key highlights about why that is?
Genetics is a major factor, definitely. There are variations in the genes for those first two enzymes we talked about, ADH and ALDH. A key highlight is that some genetic variants can lead to a buildup of acetaldehyde, causing that flushing and nausea some people experience really quickly. That leads to a lower tolerance, obviously.
So it's literally in our genes how efficiently we process that initial toxic stage. Any other genetic highlights?
Yes, there's a variant of the ADH enzyme that actually speeds up the conversion of alcohol to acetaldehyde. This can lead to a more intense initial feeling sometimes, but here's an interesting highlight. It's also been linked to some protection against alcohol-related birth defects and even alcohol use disorder.
A faster process with some potential protective benefits. That's a surprising twist, isn't it? What about things other than genetics? Does food make a difference in how we handle alcohol? What are the highlights there?
Oh, absolutely. A key highlight is that having food in your stomach significantly slows down the absorption of alcohol into your bloodstream. So that advice about not drinking on an empty stomach is really important because it affects how quickly your body has to deal with the alcohol load.
So it buys our body more time to process it, basically. Anything else about food and alcohol metabolism? That's a key takeaway.
Well, it appears that being in a fed state might actually slightly increase the liver's capacity to metabolize alcohol too. But really, the most significant highlight regarding food is definitely its impact on slowing absorption down.
Slowing down absorption. Okay, that's the main thing food does in this process. Finally, what about age? Is there a key highlight about how we process alcohol as we get older?
The key highlight here is that while the actual rate of alcohol metabolism doesn't seem to change much with age, older adults might experience the effects differently. Subjective tolerance can change.
Ah, okay.
This could be due to various factors like body composition changes or medication interactions, but the core process of breaking down alcohol remains relatively stable.
Okay, so the experience might change, but the engine is still running at a similar pace. Now that we've covered the highlights of alcohol metabolism, let's get into how it messes with our nutrient absorption. We hear empty calories thrown around. What are the important points there?
Yeah, the term empty calories is a good starting point. Alcohol provides calories, sure, but without significant beneficial nutrients. But a key highlight is that it actively interferes with how our bodies absorb, store, and use various essential nutrients. It's not just passive.
It's not just a lack of good stuff. It's actively blocking us from getting the good stuff from our food. What are the important points about how it does this?
Several things, really. Alcohol can reduce our appetite for nutrient-rich foods. It can alter the lining of our intestines, disrupt our gut bacteria, the microbiome, and even interfere directly with the enzymes that break down food. A major highlight is that it increases what's called intestinal permeability, or leaky gut, which we'll definitely discuss more.
Okay.
All of this means we're just not getting the full nutritional value from what we eat when alcohol is involved.
So it's hitting us from multiple angles when it comes to nutrients. We know heavy drinking is a big problem for nutrition, but what are the important points about nutrient absorption with even moderate drinking?
That's a great question. Even with moderate intake, alcohol can still impact nutrient levels. A key highlight is that it can hinder the absorption and utilization of B vitamins, vitamin C, and important minerals like zinc and magnesium.
Hmm.
So even if you're not a heavy drinker, regular alcohol consumption might mean you're not as nutritionally topped up as you think you are. It might warrant thinking about supplementation for some people.
That's a really important point. It's not just an issue for those with alcohol use disorder. Now, you've mentioned the gut several times. Let's dive into the surprising connections between alcohol and our gut health. What are the important points to understand?
This is a really fascinating area with a two-way street, actually. A key highlight is that alcohol significantly affects the gut, and surprisingly, our gut microbes might even play a role in our desire for alcohol, potentially influencing alcohol use disorder.
Wow, the gut influencing our drinking habits. That's an unexpected connection. But let's focus first on the direct effects of alcohol on the gut. What are the important points about this?
Right. Alcohol and its byproducts, especially acetaldehyde, can directly damage the cells lining our intestines, weakening that crucial protective barrier. A crucial highlight is that even a single drink can start to disrupt the tight junctions between these cells.
The connections between cells.
Exactly, leading to increased intestinal permeability, that leaky gut we mentioned.
Just one drink can start to compromise that barrier. What are the important consequences of this leaky gut?
Well, when the gut becomes leaky, bacteria and toxins like something called LPS or lipopolysaccharide can basically leak from the gut into the bloodstream.
Yikes.
Yeah. A key highlight is that this triggers inflammation throughout the body, not just locally, and has been linked to various diseases beyond just gut issues, liver disease, brain issues, potentially others.
So it's definitely not just a local gut problem. What are the important points about how the amount of alcohol affects this? Is it dose dependent?
It seems to be. Binge drinking causes a really rapid spike in those inflammatory toxins like LPS in the blood for up to 3 hours. And chronic heavy drinking leads to a persistently leakier gut, a higher baseline level of LPS. However, a positive highlight is that this damage appears to be reversible with abstinence. Studies show significant improvement after just about 19 days in alcohol-dependent adults.
That's good news. Our bodies can recover relatively quickly. Now, what are the important points about the gut-brain axis in alcohol? You mentioned that connection.
Yeah, the gut and brain are constantly communicating. It's a complex system. A key highlight is that alcohol can disrupt the balance of bacteria in the gut dysbiosis. And because the gut produces neurotransmitters and influences brain function through various pathways, this disruption can have knock-on effects on things like mood, anxiety, cognition, even pain perception.
Right.
Interestingly, studies in animals suggest a link between gut health and alcohol cravings. Injecting LPS into mice actually increased their alcohol consumption, suggesting a gut-related component might contribute to maybe 30–40% of alcohol use disorder cases.
That's really significant. So it's all connected in ways we might not realize. What are some important points about supporting gut health, especially if someone does consume alcohol? Are there protective measures?
Well, focusing on a diet rich in dietary fiber is crucial prebiotics. Considering probiotics, getting enough omega-3s, polyphenols from plants, and engaging in regular exercise are all important for general gut health. These might help mitigate some of the negative effects of alcohol on the gut barrier and microbiome.
Good to know that overall healthy habits can offer some protection. Let's shift gears now and talk about the brain. What are the nuances and contradictions when it comes to alcohol in the brain, focusing on the highlights?
Right. Most people know about the initial dopamine release that gives you that pleasant feeling, part of the reward system activation. But a key highlight from recent large-scale research like the UK Biobank study is pretty stark. Even low levels of daily alcohol consumption, like 1 or 2 UK units, which is about half to 1 US standard drink, are linked to a reduction in overall brain volume, both gray and white matter.
Wow, even low levels having an impact on brain volume. That's a sobering highlight, literally. What are the important mechanisms behind this potential harm?
Several factors seem to be at play. Thiamine deficiency, which can occur with chronic alcohol misuse, is one known issue affecting brain health, like the Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. But crucial highlights also include the direct toxicity of acetaldehyde to brain cells and the neuroinflammation that can result partly from that leaky gut we discussed, letting inflammatory signals reach the brain. Increased glutamate and activation of immune cells in the brain are also involved.
So it's a combination of direct damage and indirect inflammatory effects. Now, what are the important points about the potential cognitive benefits of light to moderate drinking, especially in older adults? We hear about that sometimes.
Yes, that's where it gets complex. Some observational studies have suggested a possible link between very light to moderate drinking, maybe up to 7.5 drinks a week in one analysis, in middle to late life, and a reduced risk of dementia, maybe 26–28% or even more modest. However, a key point is that this is a complex area with a lot of debate. This potential benefit seems to disappear, and the risk actually increases significantly with even slightly higher intake, say above 2 to 3 drinks a day. Also, a major factor in interpreting these studies is something called sick quitter bias.
Right, explain that again briefly.
That's where people who quit drinking because they developed health problems are grouped with lifelong abstainers in studies. This can make the abstainers look less healthy and the light drinkers look healthier by comparison, potentially creating a false impression of benefit. Some studies even found abstinence associated with higher dementia risk than light drinking, likely due to this bias.
Hey, that bias makes it really tough to interpret those findings, doesn't it? Have researchers tried to address that? What are the highlights there?
Yes, some newer studies have tried to account for this, for example, by looking only at lifelong abstainers or adjusting statistically. And while some still find a potential J-shaped curve with a possible benefit at very low levels, occasional or light moderate drinking in one study of older adults, the overwhelming highlight is that heavy drinking is consistently linked to increased dementia risk.
Okay.
Interestingly, some research also suggests that for individuals with a specific gene variant called APOE4, which increases Alzheimer's risk, even light drinking might not offer any benefit and could even be detrimental. Zero drinks is often suggested for APOE4 carriers.
So genetics plays a role in this potential dementia link as well. What are the important points about how low doses of alcohol might potentially offer some protection if they do at all?
Some proposed mechanisms include potential improvements in brain glucose tolerance, maybe some cardiovascular benefits like increased HDL, good cholesterol, or reduced platelet aggregation, which could indirectly help the brain. There's also animal research suggesting very low doses might enhance the lymphatic system, the brain's waste clearance system, although alcohol also disrupts sleep, which is crucial for that system, so it's contradictory.
Right, that sleep disruption is a major downside. And what about the highlight about red wine and resveratrol? Is that a key factor in any potential brain benefits?
While resveratrol is an antioxidant found in red wine, the amount in a typical glass is likely far too low to have a significant independent impact on brain health. So that's probably not the main story, despite the hype.
Got it. So the key takeaway for the brain seems to be a really cautious approach, especially given the volume loss findings and the risks increasing sharply with higher consumption. Now, let's move on to another area that affects many people. Alcohol and sleep. What are the key disruptions we need to know about?
Well, while a nightcap might help you fall asleep faster, it reduces sleep onset latency. A crucial highlight is that alcohol is actually detrimental to overall sleep quality. It's not a good sleep aid.
So we might nod off quicker, but what are the important points about what happens during the night?
Alcohol increases nighttime awakenings, particularly in the second half of the night as it wears off. It also disrupts the normal sleep stages. It tends to increase slow wave sleep or deep sleep in the first half of the night, which might seem good, but it often suppresses REM sleep, especially at moderate to high doses. It can reduce total REM and delay when REM sleep starts. And REM is vital for memory consolidation and emotional processing.
Okay, so it throws our natural sleep rhythm completely out of whack. What are the important points about the timing of alcohol consumption? Does that
Right.
matter?
Yes, definitely. Drinking closer to bedtime has much more pronounced negative effects, particularly on REM sleep. But an important point is that even drinking in the afternoon can still have lingering negative impacts on your sleep architecture later that night. The effects last longer than people think.
So it's not just about avoiding that drink right before bed. What are the important points for people with sleep disorders, like sleep apnea?
Alcohol can significantly worsen sleep apnea because it relaxes the muscles in the upper airway, making obstruction more likely. A key highlight is that heavy drinkers also have a higher risk of developing sleep apnea in the first place.
Not a good mix at all for those with breathing issues during sleep. Are there any important points about damage control? How to minimize the negative effects of alcohol on sleep if someone chooses to drink?
Well, the best strategy is avoidance, but if you do drink, stopping drinking at least 3 4 hours before bed is advisable. Eating a meal can help slow absorption. Staying hydrated with electrolytes might help a bit. Some suggest magnesium glycinate. Definitely avoid mixing alcohol with sleep aids like melatonin, but the main highlight is that these are minor tweaks. The fundamental disruption is still there.
Solid advice for potentially getting a slightly better night's rest, but no magic bullet. Now let's talk about the morning after hangovers. Is it just dehydration, or are there more important factors at play?
Dehydration certainly plays a role, contributes to thirst and maybe headache, but a key highlight is that hangovers are a complex physiological and psychological response involving much more than just fluid loss. They actually typically start as your blood alcohol concentration, BAC, approaches zero, so it's not the feeling of being intoxicated itself. Interestingly, there seems to be a genetic component to hangover resistance too.
Ah, genetics playing a role in hangovers. That explains why some people seem to bounce back so easily while others suffer. What are the primary important drivers of that miserable feeling then, beyond dehydration?
The key drivers include the toxic effects of acetaldehyde lingering, the production of those harmful byproducts called reactive oxygen species leading to oxidative stress, widespread inflammation, and a shift in your body's acid-base balance towards acidosis. Congeners, other compounds, and darker liquors might play a minor role for some people too.
So it's a whole cascade of negative metabolic and inflammatory effects. What are the important points about all those hangover cures we hear about? Do any of them actually work?
Unfortunately, there's really no strong scientific evidence for any specific cure. Hydration, replacing electrolytes, and eating something, especially fruit for fructose, may offer some mild symptomatic relief. Some speculative things like liposomal glutathione or N-acetylcysteine or sulforaphane are sometimes mentioned for antioxidant support, but lack robust human data for hangovers. The main highlight is that prevention drinking less, or not at all, is by far the most effective strategy. Definitely avoid taking NSAIDs like ibuprofen on an empty stomach or acetaminophen, Tylenol, with alcohol due to liver risks, and avoid hair of the dog, which just postpones the inevitable. Some research suggests zinc and vitamin B3 might be involved in alcohol metabolism, but taking them as a cure is unproven.
Right, so mostly it's about waiting it out and letting your body recover. Now let's tackle a more significant long-term issue: alcohol and longevity or health span. What are the harsh but important truths we need to understand?
Yeah, this is critical. A key highlight is that harmful alcohol use is a major global health problem, linked to millions of deaths and disability-adjusted life years lost worldwide every year. Looking at all-cause mortality, large meta-analyses suggest no significant association between low levels of drinking, less than maybe 1 to 3 drinks a day, and dying compared to lifetime abstainers, once biases are accounted for. However, risk definitely increases at higher levels, particularly for women at lower doses than men.
Okay, so maybe no benefit at low levels, but clear harm at higher levels. But what about even those low to moderate levels?
Well, even levels previously considered low to moderate may slightly decrease life expectancy compared to not drinking at all. Some analyses suggest the lowest overall mortality risk is actually at 0 drinks per day.
That's a stark highlight. Even moderate drinking would have a subtle negative impact on how long we live healthily. What about those blue zones where moderate alcohol consumption is often part of the traditional lifestyle? What's the important point there?
That's often brought up. While moderate alcohol consumption is present in some blue zones, the key highlight from researchers studying these populations is that the longevity in these regions is likely due to a complex combination of factors: strong social connections, plant-heavy diets, regular physical activity, rather than the alcohol itself providing a direct longevity benefit. It might just be tolerated within an overall very healthy context.
So it's the whole healthy lifestyle picture, not just the occasional glass of wine being protective. What's the overall important recommendation regarding alcohol and living a long, healthy life then?
Based on the current evidence, the clearest highlight is that abstaining from alcohol appears to be the safest path for optimizing overall health and longevity. If you do choose to drink, keeping it to a very low level, aiming for maybe 1-2 drinks per week, perhaps up to 5 max, seems to be where the mortality risk compared to abstainers remains minimal or non-existent based on some analyses.
A very clear message for long-term health. Now let's move to a really critical topic: alcohol and cancer. We often hear that there's essentially no safe level for many types. What are the important points here?
That's largely correct and a crucial highlight. Alcohol is classified as a Group 1 carcinogen by the International Agency for Research on Cancer, meaning it's definitively known to cause cancer in humans. It increases the risk of several cancers, including those of the oral cavity, pharynx, larynx, esophagus, liver, colorectum, and female breast. And for many of these, there's a dose-response relationship. The more you drink, the higher the risk, starting from low levels.
Even very light drinking can raise our cancer risk. What are the important points to know about specific cancers?
Yes, even very light drinking, less than 1 drink per day, has been linked to a statistically significant increased risk of breast cancer. Given how common breast cancer is, even a small increase in relative risk translates to a lot of cases. Moderate drinking, say 1 to 2 drinks daily, significantly increases the risk of both breast and colorectal cancers. A striking highlight came from a study estimating the cigarette equivalent of cancer harm, suggesting about 5 drinks per week could pose a similar lifetime cancer risk to smoking several cigarettes per week.
Wow, that really puts the cancer risk into perspective, doesn't it? What are the important points about how our drinking patterns might affect this risk? Does binge drinking matter more?
While total weekly amount is key, some studies suggest that for a given weekly amount, concentrating your drinks on fewer days, binge pattern, might further increase the risk for certain cancers, like breast cancer, compared to spreading the same amount out more evenly.
So both the total amount and how we consume it seem to be important factors. Are there any important genetic factors that might make some individuals more vulnerable to alcohol-related cancers?
Yes, definitely. Certain gene variations, particularly those affecting how we metabolize alcohol, like ADH and ALDH variants leading to acetaldehyde buildup, can significantly increase the cancer risk associated with drinking, especially in moderate to heavy drinkers.
Mm.
Also, a really important point for women with inherited BRCA1 or BRCA2 gene mutations. Even small amounts of alcohol may substantially increase their already very high lifetime risk of breast cancer.
That's absolutely crucial information for individuals with those genetic predispositions. What's an important point to understand about what happens to our cancer risk if we stop drinking? Does it go down immediately?
The important point is that risk reduction takes time. It can take many years, sometimes even decades, of abstinence for the risk of some alcohol-related cancers to decrease back towards the level of never drinkers. There might even be a temporary initial spike in risk for some cancers shortly after quitting heavy drinking, possibly due to underlying damage becoming apparent. However, the clear highlight is that quitting drinking at any point will reduce your risk over the long term compared to continuing to drink.
So it's a long-term investment in reducing risk. What are the key important mechanisms by which alcohol increases our cancer risk? How does it actually do it?
It's unfortunately a combination of factors acting together. Key highlights include the direct DNA-damaging effects of acetaldehyde, increased oxidative stress and inflammation, disruption of immune function, which normally helps clear cancer cells, alterations in hormone levels, particularly estrogen, which is crucial for breast cancer risk, negative changes to the gut microbiome, dysbiosis, causing deficiencies in nutrients like folate that are important for DNA integrity, and sometimes the presence of other carcinogenic contaminants in alcoholic products. Oh, and the synergistic effect with tobacco smoking is extremely dangerous, multiplying the risk dramatically for head, neck, and esophageal cancers.
A really concerning list of ways alcohol can contribute to cancer development. What's a prudent, important approach regarding alcohol and cancer risk based on all this?
Given the strong and consistent evidence, the most prudent highlight is to limit alcohol consumption as much as possible to minimize cancer risk. since risk appears to start even at very low levels for some common cancers like breast cancer. Avoiding alcohol entirely is the safest approach from a cancer perspective. If choosing to drink, aiming for no more than maybe 2, 3 U.S. standard drinks per week seems like a reasonable target to keep the added cancer risk relatively low for most people, though not zero.
Clear and important guidance there. Now let's tackle another area with a lot of conflicting messages over the years: alcohol and cardiovascular disease, CVD. We've all heard about potential heart benefits of moderate drinking, often the J-shaped curve. What are the important points based on current research accounting for those biases we discussed?
Right, that J-shaped curve suggesting lower risk at low moderate levels than in abstainers has been largely challenged. A key highlight for more recent studies that better account for the sick quitter bias and other factors is that any potential benefit is likely much smaller than previously thought, occurs at very low levels of consumption, maybe less than 1 U.S. drink per day, around 7 drinks a week, and might only apply specifically to ischemic heart disease, heart attacks caused by blockages, not other forms of CVD.
So those potential benefits are much smaller and more specific than the popular narrative might suggest. What are the important points about the overall relationship between alcohol and cardiovascular health across different conditions?
When you look comprehensively across various cardiovascular diseases, a large analysis actually shows a generally dose-dependent increase in risk with increasing alcohol intake for things like stroke, coronary disease other than heart attack, heart failure, hypertensive disease, and aortic aneurysm. While there's a somewhat paradoxical slight decrease in heart attack risk that persists even at higher intake levels in some studies, the overall highlight is that for most heart and blood vessel issues, more alcohol means more risk, starting from fairly low levels. The lowest risk for all-cause mortality and most CVDs seems to be around that 7 drinks per week mark, with no additional protection seen at lower levels than that.
That really shifts the narrative away from alcohol being broadly heart healthy, doesn't it? What are the important points about who might see any potential benefit, however small? Is it universal?
Not at all. A telling meta-analysis found that a potential protective effect of moderate drinking, up to 3 U.S. drinks, was observed only in men without existing comorbidities, like high blood pressure or diabetes, and under the age of 40. There was no significant benefit seen for women, younger adults overall, or anyone with pre-existing health conditions. In fact, for men with comorbidities, higher alcohol intake significantly increased their CVD risk.
Wow, okay. So any potential benefit applies to a very narrow, relatively healthy, younger male group, if at all. What are the important mechanisms by which alcohol might harm the cardiovascular system in the long run?
Chronic alcohol use can cause damage to the microvasculature, small blood vessels, lead to endothelial dysfunction, problems with the lining of blood vessels, disrupt blood pressure regulation systems, increase oxidative stress and inflammation within the cardiovascular system, and negatively affect hormonal systems involved in heart health. Binge drinking is particularly risky, significantly increasing the short-term risk of atrial fibrillation and irregular heartbeat. High doses can also weaken the heart muscle's ability to contract.
And what about the potential beneficial mechanisms at low doses? Do they hold up?
Some theoretically beneficial effects at low moderate levels include increasing HDL, good cholesterol, potentially lowering LDL triglycerides slightly, improving insulin sensitivity, and reducing some blood clotting factors. However, the key highlight is that these potential benefits seem to be easily outweighed by the harms caused by alcohol through other mechanisms, even at slightly higher intakes, and by the risks of other diseases like cancer. Oxidative stress is likely a key mechanism of damage overriding potential benefits. We also know chronic heavy use leads to alcoholic cardiomyopathy, a weakening of the heart muscle.
And what's an important point to consider about the source of some research on alcohol and heart health?
Yes, it's important to be aware that historically some research suggesting cardiovascular protection from alcohol has been linked to funding from the alcohol industry, which raises concerns about potential bias in how results are presented or interpreted.
That's a good reminder to always look critically at the source of information. So what's the key important takeaway regarding alcohol and heart health? Summing it up.
The key highlight is that the risk of most cardiovascular diseases likely increases above very low levels of consumption. Around 7-14 drinks per week seems to be a threshold. Any potential limited benefits for heart attack risk at low levels are likely outweighed by the increased risks of other serious diseases like cancer and other forms of CVD. Therefore, drinking alcohol for heart health is not recommended, And individual risk factors like family history, blood pressure, etc., are crucial to consider.
Very important nuances to understand there. Now let's look at how alcohol affects our metabolic health specifically. Type 2 diabetes, weight management, and that stubborn visceral fat around the organs. What are the important points?
For type 2 diabetes, some older observational studies showed a U-shaped or J-shaped curve, suggesting a lower risk at very low to moderate levels, maybe around 1.5 drinks a day, particularly for women, compared to abstainers. However, a key point, again, is that this might be heavily influenced by sick quitter bias and other confounding factors. When studies use lifelong abstainers as the control group or employ methods less prone to bias, like Mendelian randomization, this protective effect often diminishes or disappears, although it seems potentially more consistent for women in some analyses.
So we definitely shouldn't start drinking or advise drinking for potential diabetes benefits. What about the mechanisms? How might alcohol affect blood sugar?
Acutely, alcohol can actually lower blood glucose levels, sometimes causing hypoglycemia, partly by affecting pancreatic blood flow and maybe increasing insulin secretion. Longer term, moderate intake might improve insulin sensitivity, possibly through anti-inflammatory effects or effects on hormones like adiponectin. Some studies show moderate intake may decrease fasting insulin and improve HbA1c, a marker of long-term blood sugar control, in non-diabetics, again, sometimes more pronounced in women. But the overall highlight remains that these potential subtle benefits don't outweigh the numerous risks associated with alcohol, and exercise is a much safer and more effective way to improve insulin sensitivity.
Right, prioritize the proven safer methods.
Yeah.
What are the important points about weight gain and visceral fat accumulation?
This is more straightforward. Hazardous drinking is clearly linked to larger waist circumference and more visceral fat, especially effects that accumulate over time, with drinking into old age being particularly problematic. Some evidence suggests beer and spirits might be more strongly associated with visceral fat than red wine, but all contribute calories. Alcohol provides empty calories, it reduces the body's ability to burn fat for energy, and it can increase appetite, sometimes leading to poor food choices or late-night eating. The thermogenic effect, calories burned processing alcohol, is pretty minor.
So it's kind of a triple whammy when it comes to potentially gaining unhealthy weight. What's the overall important conclusion on alcohol and metabolic health?
The key highlight is that while very low levels of alcohol might have a complex, possibly slightly beneficial relationship with diabetes risk in some populations, especially women, the significant risks of increased waist circumference, potential adverse effects on lipids like triglycerides, and the well-established risks of other diseases like cancer make it unwise to consider alcohol a strategy for improving metabolic health. Exercise remains superior and safer.
Makes perfect sense to prioritize healthier lifestyle alternatives. Now, let's discuss alcohol and reproductive health and fertility. What are the important impacts on both sexes?
Alcohol can definitely disrupt the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal HPG axis, which controls reproductive hormones in both men and women. For women, a key highlight is that even moderate amounts of alcohol consumption seem to lower the odds of conceiving per cycle, and there's concern it might negatively impact egg quality.
So it can affect fertility chances even with moderate intake for women. What about men?
For men, the picture is slightly different. Very low intake, maybe 1 to 7 drinks per week, might not significantly impact sperm quality and could potentially even offer some protection against erectile dysfunction in some studies. However, higher levels of consumption clearly reduce sperm quality parameters. Count, motility, morphology. Chronic heavy alcohol use is well known to lower testosterone levels, although low moderate intake might paradoxically slightly increase it in some cases due to effects on liver enzymes. Heavy drinking also increases cortisol, which suppresses testosterone production.
So negative effects kick in at higher levels for men. What's an important point to know about alcohol consumption before trying to conceive for either partner?
This is a really important emerging area. Epigenetic effects. Pre-pregnancy alcohol consumption by both parents can potentially alter the health trajectory of their offspring through changes in gene expression, even without causing fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, FASD. Animal studies show paternal alcohol exposure can lead to things like glucose intolerance, altered weight, and developmental issues in offspring, mimicking some FASD features. Therefore, the important recommendation gaining traction is that both prospective parents should ideally abstain from alcohol for at least 3 months before attempting conception to optimize germ cell quality and reduce potential risks to the child. This information really should be on alcohol labels.
That's a very significant recommendation for prospective parents, focusing on both partners for several months beforehand. Finally, just briefly, what are the important points about different types of alcohol? Is red wine really significantly better for us than other options?
The popular idea that red wine is uniquely healthy is largely overblown. While it contains antioxidants like resveratrol, the amounts are likely too low in typical consumption patterns to confer major independent health benefits beyond the alcohol itself. Some large studies looking at Alzheimer's risk suggested a possible benefit only for red wine at low doses, but higher intake was risky. For CVD, some analyses find non-significantly higher risks in beer spirit drinkers versus wine drinkers. Wine consumption sometimes shows a clear G-shaped curve with mortality. Lowest risk may be around 2 drinks a day in some biased older studies, whereas non-wine consumption was linked to higher all-cause cancer mortality at any dose above 0 in one analysis, except CVD in women at very low intake.
Huh?
Red wine has also been linked observationally to slightly more favorable cardiometabolic health markers, less visceral fat, lower inflammation, higher HDL, compared to beer or spirits in some studies.
But the bottom line,
The key highlight is that choosing wine over beer or spirits might be considered a form of harm reduction in some contexts, but it's definitely not a health strategy. The ethanol itself is the primary driver of risk across all types of alcoholic beverages, especially when it comes to cancer, where all types increase risk. And some people get headaches specifically from red wine, possibly due to compounds like quercetin 3 glucuronide inhibiting acetaldehyde metabolism.
got it. So it's the alcohol content that matters most for overall risk. And finally, let's touch on alcohol and exercise. How do they interact in important ways? Should we have a beer after a workout?
Definitely avoid alcohol right before exercise. It offers no performance benefits and acutely reduces endurance capacity, though maybe not strength much. The key highlight for recovery is more nuanced. High doses, around 5 or more standard drinks, clearly impair rehydration efforts after exercise. It might not significantly impair muscle glycogen restoration if adequate carbohydrates are consumed alongside it, but it can hinder injury recovery due to immune suppression and potential negative impacts on blood flow and anabolic hormones needed for healing.
Okay, so high doses post-exercise are a bad idea for recovery. What about muscle growth?
That's another key negative. Alcohol consumption, especially at moderate to high doses, blunts muscle protein synthesis, MPS, the process of building new muscle following exercise, even when adequate protein is consumed. It disrupts signaling pathways like mTOR. Moderate alcohol after exercise can also raise cortisol, a stress hormone, and may decrease testosterone at higher doses.
So it can definitely interfere with our fitness goals and gains. What's an important point about chronic heavy alcohol use and muscle health?
Chronic heavy alcohol consumption is directly linked to alcoholic myopathy, muscle abnormalities, weakness, and wasting. Not good for maintaining strength and function.
Definitely not.
Okay.
What's a somewhat surprising important point about light to moderate alcohol in fitness games, maybe for the average person?
Interestingly, one study, playfully called the beer HIT study, suggested that very light alcohol consumption, like 1 beer a day, might not completely prevent the cardiorespiratory fitness improvements gained from high-intensity interval training, HIIT, so maybe very light intake doesn't totally negate exercise benefits for cardio fitness.
A bit of a silver lining perhaps for those who enjoy an occasional drink and stay active. And what's an important point about exercise as a tool for those struggling with alcohol use disorder?
Exercise can actually be a valuable adjunct therapy for managing alcohol use disorder. It activates similar reward circuitry in the brain, can help reduce cravings and overall drinking volume, and may even offer some neuroprotective effects against alcohol-related brain damage. It enhances self-efficacy, reduces stress, improves mood, potentially involving beta endorphins, dopamine, and growth factors like FGF21. Plus, being physically active can help lessen the increased risk of all-cause and cancer mortality associated with drinking.
So exercise has potential benefits on both ends of the spectrum, mitigating some risks and helping with recovery. Well, we have truly taken a deep dive into the highlights of alcohol consumption today, covering a lot of ground.
We have indeed. We've really tried to focus on the key takeaways from the science, the points that have the most significant implications, to give you a clearer understanding of this complex topic.
And it's clear, I think, that while the social aspect of alcohol can certainly be enjoyable for some people, the potential risks to our physical and mental health are significant and really need to be carefully considered, especially in light of the newer research challenging older ideas about benefits.
Absolutely. The weight of the current scientific evidence points towards a cautious approach being the most prudent one for overall health, with the lowest risks consistently associated with minimal or zero alcohol consumption across most health outcomes we discussed.
So, for you, the listener, It ultimately comes down to weighing that potential enjoyment or social ritual against the potential health consequences, the increased risks for cancer, the potential negative impacts on brain health, sleep, longevity, keeping your own individual circumstances, genetics, and health goals firmly in mind.
Exactly. Informed decisions based on the best available evidence are always the best decisions when it comes to health behaviors.
And on that note, here's a final thought for you to perhaps ponder. Considering all these highlights we've discussed today, the toxicity of acetaldehyde, the links to brain volume reduction, the definite cancer risks, the questionable cardiovascular benefits, the sleep disruption, is the occasional pleasure or social lubricant effect of drinking alcohol truly worth the potential, even if seemingly small for some outcomes, increased in various health risks over the long run? It's a deeply personal question, of course, and one that only you can ultimately answer, now hopefully equipped with this deeper understanding from our dive. Thanks for joining us.